welcome to the work session of the Greeley Evans School Board meeting. And we're glad that you're joining us, if you're joining us. We'll begin our work session the way that we normally do, with board member comments and reports, and we'll let Ms. Mueller go first.
Thank you very much. I did have a couple comments this week. I wanted to have a shout out to the principals at my liaison schools. I have been in communication with them, and they're reporting that their schools are working very hard, their staff is working very hard, and that they have a relatively smooth operation. Parents seem relatively happy, so thank you to Mr. Cranston at Greeley West, Mr. McDougall at Scott Elementary, and Ms. Dillahay at Jackson Elementary. They have been a joy to communicate with via email, because of course right now we can't do much other type of communication. So I look forward to being able to visit with them sometime soon. I did fall down on the job, I'll tell my other board members, and that the District Accountability Committee met last Tuesday. By the time I learned of the meeting, I realized I have class the very same time on Tuesday nights. From my class is from 5 to 7, and the District Accountability Committee meeting is from 5:15 to 7:30. They are meeting via Zoom, and so there is only one other fall meeting, and it's on October 20th. And just wanted to throw out there, if one of my colleagues on the board would be able to attend that DAC meeting on October 20th via Zoom, I'd be very appreciative, because unfortunately I only teach 2 classes at UNC, and they both happen to be at night, and that just happened to be a conflict. So let me know if you can.
I'd be happy to do that, Pepper.
Oh, thanks so much, Terry. I appreciate it. And then the last thing I just wanted to point out is I had a conversation with 2 of my own students at UNC that are secondary ed majors, and they had voiced some concerns about some confusion or confusing messaging coming to them on what they're supposed to do to get in their observation hours. They're both juniors, so they're in that phase of the STEP program of the observation. And I said I would ask how that is working, because they have gotten messaging that they couldn't go into the schools, and then certain quarantines go down and they're shifted around, and they're actually understandably concerned about how are they going to finish out this requirement for their education program and not be penalized by the fact that quarantines happen and things have shifted to online. So I just want to throw that out to you, Dr. Pilch, that there are some UNC students and I have very high achieving students, so they are pretty A-type personality, but they're very nervous about their own status in education. And I really want to encourage them, because of course we know that we have an acute shortage of teachers, and any teachers that we can encourage to continue doing the education program at UNC, I would really want to foster. And I know that District 6 and UNC have a very collaborative relationship, so any guidance I could give them, or that I could forward their names on to you, I'd really appreciate it.
President Matthews, I'd like to address that if I may.
Please.
So we did make the decision here, probably 2 weeks ago at least, to no longer have the practicum students in the brick and mortar classrooms. We did, prior to making that decision, Annette worked directly with our contact at UNC to develop a plan for those students to still be able to do their observation hours through online or through virtual instruction, if they're able to work with a teacher who's teaching synchronously, or through the online school program that we have. So I think it's been solved. I don't know if you've heard from them lately, but if you have, I think they have just probably missed something in terms of their professor. Their professors were communicating back with the students to let them know what the plan is, and that there is a plan. So there shouldn't be any issue with them getting those hours. We will allow student teachers. I want to say substitute teachers. We will allow student teachers to come into brick and mortar as well as into online, and do have student teachers right now. But quite honestly, a couple of the 7 adult cases we have in the district that are confirmed cases came out of our UNC practicum cohort. And so we just made a decision that probably wasn't a wise idea to be introducing them back into the school setting. If they were with us every day like a student teacher, that would be different, but to be coming into the classroom 1 or 2 times a week, and then the other three times a week being somewhere else for most of their day is a sure way to possibly be increasing more opportunity for COVID. So we just felt like we had to make that decision and put that safeguard in place. And like we're very concerned about the national teacher shortage, and we certainly don't want to push teacher candidates away. But also, I think we have a good solution for them to still be able to get their time in and to do some meaningful work, and probably in an environment that they will be teaching in one day.
I appreciate the clarification. I suspect that there's just a information gap between the student and the teacher and the transformation to online.
So their UNC professor should have that information. If they don't, and they feel like they've been moved out of brick and mortar, have them work with our Human Resources Department and go directly to Mrs. Overton, and we'll get that figured out.
Okay. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Pepper. Mr. Hafley.
I would like to thank and congratulate Ms. Myers and her staff for doing an outstanding job on the new District 6 logo and marketing plan. It's an incredibly strong logo that represents us very well, and you and your staff deserve unbelievable credit for doing a spectacular job. So thank you very much. We appreciate that. I also want to thank you, Ms. Myers, for this wonderful document. It's very helpful for us. I had a phone call last night from a healthcare professional. She's a cardiothoracic ICU nurse, and she wanted to compliment us on being open because of the profound impact it has on our students, and she was delighted that it was occurring. She did ask where we received all of our information and who was guiding us, and I went through the litany of people who have advised us and have made us stronger, and she was pleased to get the information, and we said good night, and she said thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hafley. Ms. Solis.
So I want to give a shout out to all of our counselors. They are just inundating the internet with things for scholarships for kids to apply to, deadlines, making sure that they're doing what they need to do. And it's so cool to see this come up on some of my social media, and then I go out and share it. And just making sure that kids know the opportunities and things that are out there, and making sure that they take advantage of it. So just a big shout out to all of our counselors at all of our schools. I got to attend the book discussion with Jesse Tijerina and a lot of other community people on the Bless Me Ultima. And I didn't know how that was going to affect me. I've seen the movie. I hadn't read the book yet, and so we're just getting into it. But I was just buzzing after the whole thing, just talking about our culture, talking about things that reminded me of my grandmother and my grandfather, and just connecting with people and all of these things that we don't necessarily get to talk about on an everyday thing. So it was really exciting to see all the discussion input as far as the excitement around the book and what it brought out and the stories and the things that we were sharing. So I'm really proud of Jesse for putting this together, and I'm excited to keep reading. And one of my cousins is married to an Anaya who's actually related to the author. So that was kind of exciting.
Well, thank you, Ms. Solis. Ms. Pappas.
I want to thank Dr. Pilch and your staff for thinking about taking October 12th off. I think that is going to be just an amazing gift to our employees, so I thank you very much for that. I have had quite a few people ask me about Schoology, and I reached out to Dr. Pilch and talked to her a little bit about how we might be able to see what Schoology is actually like. So that, just want to let you all know that. I don't know if you have experienced it or not, but I have not. And then I also, later on, maybe when we're talking about the legislative resolution discussion, I also want to bring up the idea of us doing a letter to the State Board of Education regarding state assessments this year, so just to have that in your thinking. And then a thank you to everyone who attended.
May I, Mrs. Pappas, sorry to interrupt you.
You're fine.
And I wonder if we might include in that any unfunded new mandate from the state.
Perfect idea.
You know, so I can share more about that, and as we work to draft the letter, we can talk about that. So.
Thank you. Thank you. And then I just wanted to thank everyone for attending the virtual Dream Team breakfast. We think it was great. We delivered breakfast sandwiches to quite a few people, and just a big thank you all for participating in that. That's all.
Mr. Talley?
I too really enjoyed the Dream Team breakfast. I thought it was really fun to watch, and I was really curious, and I liked the bloopers that came out today. I was really curious to know how many times or how many takes did it take to get it. And so it was nice to see that come out. I really enjoyed watching that. I also really like the new logo. I think that it's groovy. I don't know if that's still a word that we use, but it's pretty cool. I like it. It's very youthful, I guess is a good way to put it. And then I had a conversation with this parent, and her and I were like bonding over the fear of every time the phone rings, is it going to be the school saying your kid's class is quarantined, you have to come get your kid, or things like that. And so I just want to tell her, I hear you, I heard you, and trust me, I know that there's more than just us two out there that feel that, and we're going to get through it together. And like I told her, feel free to reach out to me if you ever just want to vent to me. I really appreciate her concerns and her conversations. And then also want to touch on the October 12th. I know that I also had somebody ask about Terry's lanyard and my lanyard, because they're both the same. And so October 12th in South Dakota, and I know I'm in Colorado, I know, but is Native American Day. And so a lot of us celebrate that as, not as Columbus Day, but as Native American Day. And so just want to say thank you to the individual that recognized their lanyards, and then thank you to Dr. Pilch for bringing that day up. I know that we don't celebrate that here as that day in Colorado, but it's coming. I could feel it. That's all I have.
I don't have too much to add. I will say great job to Ms. Pappas on her video for the Not Success Foundation, the Dream Team Breakfast. And great job today, Dr. Pilch, on the town hall. So it's good to see. And that's all I have. Ms. Mash is missing at the moment. She should be joining us for our business session, but she's watching her daughter run a cross-country race. So moving right along, everybody has their calendars, and again, our calendars are much briefer than they normally are. So is there anything that we need to see that's not on the calendars before us?
Can you remind me of one? I think you have another town hall meeting on Wednesday, Dr. Pilch?
Yes.
And what time is that?
It's at 8 a.m. again, and this one will primarily be, other support staff who weren't able to come on today, and high schools, because the high schools were in an instructional day today. So we had just over 300 people registered for it today, and we'll be making these available for viewing later as well, for folks who want to view them later.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other calendar events?
So, Mr. Matthews, I'll just add, I don't know if this got on your calendar or if you even got invited. There is a check presentation tomorrow from Atmos Energy that will occur at Centennial Elementary School at 1:30. I think they're going to be there about 1 o'clock and do some pictures with nutrition services and things. But I know if any of you are available, you'd be more than welcome, just to be a part of that. They are donating $25,000 to nutrition services.
And what time is that again?
At 1:30. But I think they'll be there at 1. I can't get there till 1:30, so I know they're going to actually do the check presentation at 1:30, but they're going to do some photo ops and things outside there with the nutrition services people at 1. Christina, were you going to add something?
I was just going to say, if you are going to attend, I'll need to know so that I can
Oh, we
post
need to
that,
post
because
it.
it is less than 24 hours.
Yeah, so can you all just let her know? I mean, right now, do any of you plan to go? Do you know?
I'll go.
Do you need us to go?
Well, it's lovely if we have some representation, so.
I'll go as well.
2 of you can go, good. Now we don't have to post it.
Excellent,
Okay,
and
good.
we're fully legal. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you, Christina.
Any other calendar updates?
We're not meeting on the 12th, correct?
We are not meeting on the 12th, provided we pass that. later in our
so
business
it's-
meeting. So yes, we don't even have the 4 that are on here. We only have 2, 2 in the near future. So, all right. Well, we are to the big part of our work session, and that's our Cosby legislative resolution discussion. And so, Dr. Pilch, I will kick that over to you to get us started on this.
Thank you, President Matthews. So Natalie does plan to attend the delegate assembly next month, which will be on Friday, October 30th, and will vote on behalf of the school district and represent the school district in the delegate assembly hosted by Colorado Association of School Boards. So you do have in your board item the resolutions. You'll see, those of you who've been here with us for a while, you'll see some things that we've seen in the past. Those of you who weren't with us a year ago, this is typical of what will come forward in terms of districts and organizations proposing legislation. And then what we typically do is we go through and we, affirm or refute or ask questions about the resolutions. I want to be frank, just as you've not had a lot of time to review these, neither have I. We just received them at the end of last week. But I think a good place to start is with the standing resolutions on officially on page 1, which these are the Cosby standing resolutions that are ongoing, and I think that we have typically supported these standing resolutions, and so if there's any concern with supporting them, I think it's a good time for us to let Natalie know that before she goes down on the 30th. So are we comfortable with the first section around student academic growth and achievement, knowing that we do plan to put together a letter around the possible impact of state assessment this school year? I think, one of the things we were visiting about today, not only is there concern over the disparity of how students may perform depending on when school districts came back into session or didn't come into session, and really there's some significant, I think, access and equity issues with what occurred last spring, with families and us all being forced to go online when we knowingly did that, with many families not having access to the internet. So I think there's some issues around that. I think for me, probably the greatest issue is I don't know how much value this test is going to provide us this year. I think every student in Colorado will probably see some dip in achievement. And I am sad to say that, and I keep saying we're providing quality education. We absolutely are. And we stopped brick and mortar teaching and learning last March. And many of our colleague school districts have still not come back into brick and mortar learning. So this isn't just about District 6 children. I think it's about children throughout our state. I also think that of all years where we need those additional 2 weeks of instruction, this is the year that we need those additional instructional days. And I think we'll gain far more by additional instructional days than what we will having that data that is probably going to predict exactly what we think it is, which is that this national pandemic has had an impact on student achievement throughout the state and throughout the country. So that's, I think in looking at the student academic growth and achievement resolutions, I think I just want to point that piece out as a caveat if we go forward and continuing to support these. You see the resolutions around finance, strong commitment from Cosby.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Concerning the testing, can you give me possibly the rationale that CDE has for continuing to want to conduct those tests as we move forward in the school year? Is there some pressure on them?
Yes, it's a federal mandate, so there's federal pressure, but there's also significant belief, I think, at the state board level that it is very important to continue to test students and to have that accountability piece in place around testing students statewide. I think there's a worry that if we don't test students, then we won't, we might let up on the academics. And the reality is people are working and pushing as hard as they absolutely can out there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Mueller.
I do have one comment. I want to say that we have seen at the collegiate level that there is huge access issues with taking the ACT, the SAT, and the GRE, and most colleges are actually waiving them for this coming year. Many universities across the U.S. are waiving the ACT, they're waiving the SAT, and I know the graduate school programs my students are looking at are waiving the GRE.
Well, that sounds like a great argument to go in our letter to the state board.
I will tell you right now, my students have had huge problems with ETS testing sites not being open, not being consistently open. In order to get a proctor to do the testing at home, it requires a lot of technology that many poor students just simply don't have access to. I would really, really support a resolution that we do not test this year unless those access issues can be resolved by the state.
Yeah, that's a great, and so when we get to the resolutions, you will see some of that in here, and we could talk about how we might advocate for that. I think the other important thing that you mentioned, Pepper, was just really around this access piece. So every student who is in a full-time online learning program will have to come in brick and mortar to be tested. So then we've got to figure out, where do we bring those children to be tested, and have them very likely socially distanced, and how do we, and who proctors those tests for them? So it's very complex.
Didn't we have problems with AP exams in the spring as well because of access and online problems?
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't at our level. I'm saying it was at the
some.
I mean,
I think most of that was resumed. I think really because it was very different. They really allowed what they allowed on the AP exam this past spring was very different than what we would do in an AP exam in brick and mortar. I mean, there was a great deal of waiving that went on with International Baccalaureate. They fully waived the International Baccalaureate exams and went with the teacher's recommendations. So it just looked very different this past spring. Again, they were showing some flexibility in a time of an emergency health emergency. And we too had our testing waived last spring. So I think that's part of the urgency to get us back into testing, is that we didn't have data this past spring. And I think there's genuine concern that there are schools that were on the clock that need to get off the clock, or schools that are on the clock that need to be held accountable for their failure to turn that school around. And without a state test to inform that, the state board does not have another tool in which to deliver that system. So they froze everything this past spring. We all just stayed at the same ranking.
But we'll have another chance to discuss this one, right? Okay.
So I think I'm going to just move through the standing resolutions, unless you all, there's others of these standing resolutions you all want to discuss and give Natalie feedback on. And then you see that the Colorado School Boards Association has federal resolutions that are not only informed by the Colorado Association of School Boards, but also by the National Association of School Boards. And you see the big ones here. American, Individuals with Disabilities Act, or Special Education, the Career and Technical Education Funding. You remember the conversations in the past, those of you who've been here, around Carl Perkins funding. That comes through these career and technical education dollars. The school nutrition funding, so the USDA funding that we receive. Those are the three big funds that we receive at the federal level. And I think all of us have an expectation they continue, right?
Or increase.
Yeah, exactly.
Around IDEA.
Yeah, exactly. Adequately fund these programs, please. Please. So, President Matthews, I don't know how you would best like to move through these. There are several pages here, and so what you see in the first under student academic and growth, you see this is submitted by the St. Vrain Valley School District Board of Education, and you see that the idea is that the state auditor be directed to conduct an independent performance audit of the state's current K-12 accreditation framework and accountability system, and they report those findings to the House and Senate Education Committees. And so I will just weigh in and say that as superintendent, certainly I can't speak on behalf of the board, I am supportive of this. This is a conversation that several of us superintendents have asked about. The day that Mr. Matthews and I went and testified in front of the state board about school accountability, we asked for an audit to be conducted and for us to have an opportunity to re-look at the system and to determine is the system working or not, and if it is not, then what should be in place of this system. So can we say we support?
And this one is forwarded with favorable recommendation by the Legislative Resolution Committee.
Yeah. So maybe that's a good way to start. That the whole first part of this, they are all coming forward as favorable from the Cosby Legislative Resolution Committee. Mm-hmm. So the next one, again, similar or piggybacks, not similar, but piggybacks. And so I'll let you just take a moment and look at that. Again, submitted by St. Vrain. So the idea, and I commend them for proposing this, is that we would be able to increase Wi-Fi access to students and to school districts, and you know, this is especially important in the environment we're in right now.
Does anybody have any objection to supporting this one? All right. Our next one is, to some degree, on the conversation that we've been having, right, Dr. Pilch? Number 3.
Go ahead. Feel free.
This one, again, comes forwarded with favorable recommendation by the Legislative Resolution Committee, which means that they've looked at this and support this. But this is, CASB supports continuing the COVID-19 waivers, pausing state testing, related teacher accountability measures, and the accountability clock for 2020-2021 school year. So again, what we've just been talking about, pausing testing for this year. And I think we are in support of this. We've talked about doing a letter in addition to supporting this, a resolution rather. But I'm assuming that everyone is in support of this. Also, I don't know if you mentioned this, Dr. Phillips, we would have to bring in children to test, right?
Yes.
So all of our online students,
Yep.
they would not get to take those tests
Yep.
online, which
That's
creates some spacing issues for
Correct.
us as well.
I appreciate the sentiment, I suppose, but it's just apples and oranges. It's two different completely situations of testing and two different completely types of education and instructional methods. So I don't even know if it's going to be well worth the expense on the state's behalf to even try to compare these years, because we're doing something that's never been done before. And I just think it's almost insanity to believe we can do business as usual.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. I also wonder, in addition to writing a letter, if it would be beneficial to also have a presence at the state school board. I don't know what the protocols or anything for that is, but I feel this is really important, not just for District 6, but the entire state of Colorado.
So I think I will tell you the sentiment of the superintendents is we get this changed at the legislative level. We don't believe we're going to get this changed at the Colorado Department of Education level with the state board. At least that most of my colleagues who I visit with about this issue, that's, our belief is we work with our legislators to change this. That change is going to come from the state board. But so I think your letter, your resolution can go to both the legislators as well as to the state board. And even as you look at the next piece, which is really around teacher evaluation, educator effectiveness, it links directly back to this same issue of testing and testing being the driver for believing a belief that that's how we change teacher practice and improve instruction, which there's very little evidence that's really the driver of improved teacher efficacy.
Well, let's keep.
So
will we come back to this when we talked about a letter? Where would that fit in?
Well, I think it absolutely fits in supporting the first one, resolution number 3. I mean, I think that's where it goes. But I also think that we can have communications chief work on this for us, and then we can begin to disseminate that,
Okay.
at the state level it's really after the legislative session begins. So we still have a little bit of time. We'll be back together, at the end of October to look at that letter and finalize it. Okay.
But we're all in support of number 3. Okay. Then moving right along, number 4. This is, again, forwarded with favorable recommendation from the Legislative Resolution Committee. And Cosby, in effect, supports continued reform in teacher evaluation process to encourage courageous conversations between administrators and teachers that lead to the real goal of setting an effective receiving effective feedback. And the reason for this is that the belief is that the current evaluation is cumbersome, expensive, and overly bureaucratic. And, Mr. Haefele.
I agree that the evaluation process is really challenging, but do they have a plan in place to change it, or are they just making the statement that it needs to be investigated?
I think you'll see in future resolutions that there's some suggestion for actually changing it as well, Mr. Haefele. But this is all part of this this conversation around the accountability system and this audit of the accountability system, because even though it was 191 is what enacted the teacher effectiveness and the teacher evaluation piece, it directly goes back to the test score, and the test score is a piece of that accountability system.
And I know I read through it, so are they looking to take the testing component out of it and just do the teaching skills? No,
I think it depends who you talk to, Mr. Haefele, on what they're proposing. I mean, this is really just proposing that that districts would be allowed to have another system for teacher evaluation that is deeper than those test scores.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any objection to supporting this?
I have a question.
Sure.
At what point do we see like solutions to what this other system would look like? Or, I mean, do they have ideas? Are there ideas out there?
Well, I think it depends on who you talk to. So there are some folks who would say, let's just throw the whole thing out, throw all of 191 out and start over, or not have anything like 191 at all. And then I think there are other educational leaders who would say, no, I think there's value in this. Let's do an audit of what's working and what isn't working and look to see, are there other measures that we use to determine teacher effectiveness in addition to the measures that are currently in place. So I think it really depends on which conversation you're in. I think for Cosby's Legislative Resolution Committee and for the Poudre School District, I mean, they clearly believe there's a need for a complete revamp of the educator evaluation system, which will take legislative action because of, it was Senate Bill 191.
And how long SB 191 been in place? Remind me.
Oh, gosh. Nate would know this by now. It's been years. I mean,
It's been about 10 years. It came in like 2010, 2011,
2010.
I would guess.
yeah, I mean, it's a long time.
Okay.
We'll find that out for you.
Any other questions or any?
It was 2010.
2010. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Good job, Mr. Hafley. Gosh, 10 years. It probably should be evaluated.
Right? That's what I was thinking.
So maybe one way to proceed, Mr. Matthews, just say, is there any concern with moving this forward for support? Any concern with moving this forward for support?
Number 4, you mean,
Yes.
Dr. Pilch? Yeah, is there any concern with number 4? Okay. So we'll vote to support number 4. Next is number 5, and this one is around, well, it also is forwarded with favorable recommendation from the legislative committee, but it's October count model, and the essentially what they're proposing is to come up with a more equitable way to count school districts, and I see everyone nodding their head. Another part of our education system that doesn't make a lot of sense, that we just want to count kids on one day. And those districts like ours that often have difficulty getting kids to school are at a disadvantage. So they are looking at a more equitable way. Dr. Pilch, do you have any?
You know, we've discussed this multiple times, I think, in the past as a system. So I agree that a single count day is not appropriate, and especially this year. When superintendents, we're all sharing. If your district is a district of any size, we are all down hundreds of students, and we are not able to account for where all those students are. In many cases, it's preschool and kindergarten students whose parents have decided to not have them start this year, and have redshirt them is a term that's being used for our little kinders and preschoolers. So, although a single day, especially in this model where part of our kids are online and part of our kids are in person, some of all of our high schoolers, most of our high schoolers are on a hybrid schedule. A single count day is certainly not favorable probably for anybody, and especially for a district with our demographic. Having said that, it isn't helpful either if there's a single count day in October and a single count day in February, and then we have to give money back, which is what some states do. So although I support that the system be revised, I would also want, and I would like my recommendation be that Ms. Mash take back, we want included in this, a thorough study that, as it says here, to work with superintendents, professional associations to ensure a new system that serves the needs of all schools across the state. I mean, that is the most important part of this. Depending on the system that is developed, it could be punitive to us as a district. So you've seen something like this come forward before, where they've proposed a day in October and then another day in February, and we have actually opposed that because I don't think that will benefit us. Because of partly because of what happens with kids as you go throughout the school year.
So would there be another time in the year that would be beneficial to have another count day?
I think that most of us would say don't do it. Let me say what I would say. I would recommend you don't have any single day, that you look to do averages, and you look at windows of time, like rolling averages, and you look at average daily attendance and determine a count in that manner. The other thing that does is it still holds people accountable for keeping kids here. So right now, there is nothing after October, whatever the date is, October 7th or whatever, after that date that incentivizes a school or a district to keep a child in that district. So because they're not, there's no money for them after that date. So I actually am a proponent for dates that go beyond one date in the fall. Dates that are a combination of dates that would keep kids here and keep us working hard to have students engaged throughout the school year.
So if we were to do any kind of letter in support of this, is there a way to include that information in there so they have something to kind of work with or know what we're kind of thinking?
I think I don't think you need to do a letter. I think what probably needs to happen is we need to have a conversation with Natalie.
Okay.
So Natalie knows what to take forward. And then if it ends up on the House or Senate floor, we may want to go testify.
Okay.
I have a question regarding this. How are we counting this year with the different instructional methods?
Yeah, students will have to be engaged on that day online for it to count.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So people are worried. We're worried. Every superintendent is worried. So they will have, we will have to be able to demonstrate that the students went in and logged in online and were engaged in instruction on count day.
Well, I've always had a problem with one count day anyway, because it limited, especially those students who were very involved in extracurricular activities. They could not do anything on that day. It limited if we had a snow day, miraculously. I mean, I know they would shift the count day, but it just, I think it causes problems.
I don't think student activities interfere with that, Ms. Mueller, because that's not counted as official absence. It's counted as an activity absence. But you're right. I mean, if you were going to take a family trip, or you're sick.
Right.
Yep.
I think an aggregate of days actually makes the most sense instead of one magical day. So I would be in support of looking at that system again.
I know back in a few years ago when I was here with the district, what you see is after the single day, you see an influx of students coming back from online platforms or schools, or being shifted around from different schools to alternative schools. So I like the idea of having an average of this time, so we're not targeting, and then after that date, some schools or some programs might be like, all right, you can go if you want. I don't know. I don't like the one day deal either.
You make a great point, Mr. Talley.
I'm not hearing any opposition to moving or to supporting this, but we do want to have a conversation with this, Ms. Mash.
Yeah, we will. Okay. So the final one that has been moved forward from the Legislative Resolution Committee under Finance is that Cosby supporting the efforts to build a coalition addressing Colorado state funding requirements resulting from Tabor or the Gallagher Amendment that may result in a future statewide referendum or initiative for a ballot measure amending the Colorado Constitution. If Gallagher is amended, there should be a systematic and fair process put in its place to equalize local education funding across the state. So what you see is what many of you have become familiar with around the concerns with state funding and the constitutional restrictions that are in place because of Tabor and Gallagher and the impact that has on the state budget, and then therefore has an impact on funding for school districts. So you can see here in this language that there's a belief that to continue the budget stabilization factor is contrary to Amendment 23, which has been tested and we did not win that. But I think it is the right argument to continue to have for funding for education.
And is there something on the ballot this year about Gallagher?
There is.
Yes, and so this could become even more important as a result of that.
Okay.
So is there any concern in us moving this forward with Natalie?
Nope. This has been talked about and talked about and talked about.
Yes, it
at
has.
the school finance level.
Yes, it has. It's another one we'll probably want to go testify on if it makes it to the floor. All right, then what we have next are resolutions that are put forth by individual school districts. Seems like there were a few more that were forwarded on.
There are.
Yes, I thought so. So one got poked in here that I don't think is supposed to be considered Yeah. So let's skip this next one that's on page 11 and come back to it, please, and go ahead and go to page 12. This is to support funding, additional funding for the E-rate program for school districts for broadband. We do get E-rate funding reimbursement. So the idea here is to continue to support that and to expand that. And I'd recommend that we support this as well. Maybe more so than ever.
Right?
Any concern with moving that forward? So the next one, not surprising, you see and hear several COVID-19 needs, but this is asking for additional support for federal funding for school districts to compensate for the expenses that have come as a result of responding to COVID-19, and just supporting a resolution to go to the feds in relation to that. And I think we all believe we all believe there should be some more funding forthcoming as a result of COVID-19 as we continue.
And just to be clear
respond.
for anybody watching, we have spent way over the CARES money that we
Yes.
received just on
Right.
air
Yes.
purification systems
Yes.
and
Yeah,
all the additional
just
materials.
just right now we have a significant need with nurses, health services, and really would want to add more nurses if we could. And we went ahead and spent beyond our CARES Act dollars, added another full-time nurse, hired back some retired folks to help us to do some of the day-to-day work that our nurses do, so that our nurses who have been, who are here full-time continue to respond to COVID. But we have far outpaced those dollars that came. And having said that, those dollars were dramatically needed, and I'm so thankful for them. We would have never been able to do what we did had we not had that $12 million.
Can you remind me of how much money we received?
12 million.
How many?
12 million is what we received in CARES Act funding. Okay. Oh, yes. This one's important as well. So most school districts and Cosby are saying, let's use last year's enrollment to fund school districts this year, knowing that most school districts have declined in the numbers of students, and I think the numbers of families who are saying I'm homeschooling, and they will be coming back after October count. They're going to be coming back. I mean, they're already coming back. So I certainly support this, and it would benefit our school district. I want to say that. There are a few districts like Brighton 27J that have actually grown their enrollment, not near the number they thought they were going to grow, I think by 500 or 600, and they've only grown by a couple of hundred. So they actually, want to be funded on their October count. But most of my superintendent colleagues are saying, yes, this is the year to fund us, just hold us flat on funding from last year in terms of count. Is there any concern with us supporting that? I put 3 lines under the word support. This one is a big deal. So this next one is that Cosby it opposes attempts to provide public dollars to private schools, whether that be in the form of tax credits or vouchers, but any effort that would cause a reduction in funding to public schools by funding private schools, this resolution opposes that. I see lots of heads nodding. All right, another finance. This is a resolution that says let's do a comprehensive reform effort on the School Finance Act, and look at the overall statewide tax structure and provide adequate and equitable funding for students in the state of Colorado. And then you see that school districts have lost $9.3 billion of constitutionally required funding since 2009. I think this, I've heard our board say this over and over again, so I feel pretty confident we support this one.
And let's repeat that, 9.3 billion.
Yeah. And what's exciting, I think, to see about this is the school district that pulls this forward had not always been supportive of this. And so with some change in leadership in that district, we see that, a support of this. And that is very, very good when you have districts who are financially in a pretty stable place, but still know that funding is inadequate, advocating for more adequate funding by changing the formula. So it's one thing to just advocate for more funding, but it's another thing to say, let's change the formula of how we fund education.
That's true. They would be potential losers in
Yes.
changing the formula.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so this next one, I don't know that I feel that strongly about, so I guess I want you all to weigh on it. It is about local governance and probably impacts you all more than it does our day-to-day operation. And quite honestly, Nate and I have not been able to have a conversation about this from a legal perspective, but this is one we probably would want Nate to weigh in for us before we make a decision about where we land on this one.
I was going to ask a question. What does it change? Is it currently more than 14 days, or? I guess I don't understand this well enough to know why there's a proposed change.
This proposal is that, yes, there is no 14 days now at all. So this proposal is that there would be a wait time prior to the hiring of an executive. So it'd be if you all had to hire another superintendent. If you just have one finalist.
I got you.
So it's actually saying you all should wait on the hiring, I believe.
And what's the argument for that?
I don't know,
It
Rhonda.
says in here like chilling effect that a potential candidate's desire to apply for superintendent position. So because their name is out there, is that why?
Yeah, it absolutely is, Ray. So this idea that a school board would have to wait 14 days to actually to say who their one sole finalist is, and then let me say that again. You would announce who your finalist is, and then there would be a 14-day waiting period before you could take board action on that. So that name would be public for that 14 days, which if you are a finalist for a job in many school districts, until you have actually verbally accepted that job with the board president, then it goes to a vote of the whole school board. In this case, so the way you guys did it here is not how all districts do it the way you did it when you hired me, whereas you actually voted that night in the boardroom prior to calling me and saying that I was very likely the sole finalist, and am I willing to accept this position if we can come to an agreement on a contract. So, John, Mr. Hafley.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Talley, that was really, really an uncomfortable situation that we were in. We were down to 3 finalists at that point, and we knew which one that we wanted to bring forth. And we had outside pressure that was just incredibly immense at that point, that we talked about all 3 candidates and the positives and the challenges of all 3, which we felt was really unfair both to Dr. Pilch as well as the other two candidates, who were both very qualified and good people. And we received this, Ms. Solis would agree, this unbelievable pressure from one individual who had social media power, and that was the reason that it was done the way it was. Because there's lots of districts, they come up with one person, they present that person, and I think this 14 days allows people to get in the ears of all the board members that they know and share their thoughts about that candidate.
Okay.
So the other piece here, though, is that you wouldn't have to name your other finalists for those 14 days.
And that's really, really important, because we had to talk about the goods and the bads of those people, and that was really, really uncomfortable for all of us when we made the decision concerning Dr. Pilch.
So it doesn't prohibit a board having multiple finalists, but it allows a board to go down to one finalist, is what it does, prior to having taken action on that person.
And does this apply for interim positions too?
Well, I assume it would, Rhonda. I assume it would. I mean, it's the executive position, so I assume probably so.
Overall, it seems like a positive change, yes, from your position as a superintendent.
I think anything that encourages a Board of Education to have candidates come forward, and so this, makes a safer environment for candidates. So to just kind of walk you through how it could look, instead of bringing 3 finalists into the district and having them go through the whole thing like you did when I was hired, a board would be allowed to bring just one person in and do that, thereby keeping the other 2 finalists, other candidates that you were considering confidential, maybe to protect them in their employment in their current district or for other job searches they might be engaging in. So it does make a safer environment for candidates to come in.
I think I like this, but I don't like the 14-day part of it. To me, it just seems like it's, like Mr. Afley said, it gives you more time for people to attack or whatever it may be, get in the ears if they need to, but I don't know.
Well, and I also wondered about our process that we did. I mean, because we had community groups that were also interviewing, so how would you keep the candidates information?
Yes, you couldn't do that if you chose to just have one finalist before community group. So I'll give you an example. I don't know how much it would ever apply in a community like ours, but there are some very large districts where candidates want to know they are going to be kept confidential until they are the finalist. Because of the district they're currently in, or because the position is so high profile. I don't know that this is that big of a deal in Colorado. It very well may be in Douglas County, Jefferson County, Denver Public Schools, those very large districts in our state. But I mean, that's where you see candidates worried about this sort of thing, of being out there as a finalist and being public, and they're not really going to be the choice.
So, and if this was in place, I mean, the way we did it, we wouldn't be able to do that.
You would
with
not.
community members.
You are right.
So, yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Well, you could, though, yeah?
You could.
You just wouldn't have to.
Yeah. You can. You just
can
don't
have
have
3.
to.
Oh, okay.
So this would, yes, you're absolutely right, President Matthews. What this does is it opens it up that if a district doesn't want their candidates public to protect the candidates' anonymity, they don't have to make them public until that last 14 days.
But it doesn't require you to?
No.
Okay.
And I apologize, I don't know, well, it looks like just Cosby brought this forward. I was going to say it doesn't look like a school district brought this forward. So,
Academic district?
yeah.
Academy District
Academy
20.
district, yeah.
Does it say Academy did?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, there it is at the top, sorry. Well, they recently did a superintendent search, so that makes sense.
I think that was my only question, kind of as Rhonda was suggesting, is there any unintended consequences that end up becoming a negative in causing it to tie districts' hands, so to speak, on what they could do. But if this is not a mandate, but instead of a, you can do it this way,
Yeah.
then I'd be more in favor of it.
And you know what, I'm going to have Nate do some work on this from the legal side and look at current statute and look at this, and we'll get you some more information on this when we come back together later
Okay.
this month, okay?
I mean,
We'll
I don't know if it really applies to us where we'd really even need to weigh in right now on this.
We can always say it's not our fight. And number 14. Oh wait, that was number 14. Yeah. Oh no, wait.
No, that was 13.
That was 13.
So I'm going to just let you all talk about this.
What? I really want to know what you think.
So is this saying that if I have a child and there is a prescription from my child's physician that I can or another qualified person can give that child the medication during the day while at school?
I think we've already done this at a state level, right? We're just asking Congress to recognize our states.
That's what I was
That's what I was
wondering. I
thinking.
feel like
Yes.
that's what I was wondering.
You're absolutely right.
I feel like we just passed that
The piece
policy.
that is important here is that the school district be allowed to designate who the primary caregiver is, so that a parent cannot say, I want the school health clerk to be designated the primary health caregiver or the kindergarten teacher to act in my place and administer the cannabis. Thereby recognizing at a federal level the parent must come in and administer that for the child, which is what we do here in Colorado. And that's our local policy as well.
I'm unsure what the federal government would do.
Right. I know. I know.
I'm just not sure why this is needed.
I think I would recommend we stay neutral on this.
I'm going to probably regret saying this after I say it, but really we couldn't even come to an agreement on hemp. So I don't think Congress is going to take this up anyway,
Yeah.
so I think if we just stay neutral and just do the things the way we've been doing them, is probably the best.
I'm going to recommend we stay neutral, unless you all have other recommendations.
All right.
That's fine.
Well, let's move on to number 15. This is to use bus video to capture penalized traffic violators or stop arms on buses. Cosby supports a proposal to use bus video to capture penalized traffic violators of stop arms on buses. And this does not come with a recommendation from Cosby.
No. And probably I'm going to make an assumption that this isn't where Cosby is going to spend their resources
Okay.
to advocate. I would, again, recommend we are neutral on this. I guess and I don't want to, let me have Chief Gates look at this. We haven't looked at this as a cabinet.
Okay.
Let me have him look at this and see if he sees advantage to this. And Nate, both Mr. Fall and Chief Gates look at this and just see implications that we would feel like we need to just say no to this, or we should say yes to this. Okay?
Thank you.
So the next one then, number 16, would be, and this is forwarded with favorable recommendation from the legislative committee, Cosby supports adoption of policies and legislation amending the Colorado Charter Schools Act regarding the process of obtaining waivers from Colorado law, including requiring the requesting charter school to provide written rationale for seeking each such waiver. And the rationale is that would bring a level of transparency to the process of charter school waivers.
I think this board in the past, maybe not since Mr. Tully and Mrs. Pepper have come on, but this board in the past has talked about the ability for charter schools to waive policies without justification, and that we can't really even do that with our own schools. And so I would recommend that we support this. I think not only does it bring a level of transparency, it causes the charter school to think through what are the policies they should have and what are the policies they do not need to have, and why, rather than come in and just say we're going to waive all the policies that we're allowed to waive by state law, which some charter schools will do that. Ours have typically not, but some charter schools will do that.
I would agree to support.
Any objection to supporting this? Okay. Move on to number 17. We're going to have to move.
We're almost there.
We're almost there? Okay.
Yep. We're getting close.
This one also forwarded by with favorable recommendation from the Legislative Resolution Committee. And that's Cosby supports the repeal of the Claire Davis School Safety Act. This law was passed in the wake of a school shooting and did not provide any funding for improving school safety. It puts an undue burden on school systems to predict who might commit an act of violence against a school, and school districts are already doing their best to protect students and staff. It seems like one of these unfunded mandates that we talk about. Dr. Pilch, is that correct?
I would agree.
Any reason we shouldn't support this one?
Well, it's distasteful to not support the Claire Davis School Safety Act. I mean, that is why school districts have struggled with bringing this issue forward. But I will tell you, it does put an undue burden on school systems, and so.
And this is a state or federal?
This is state. State.
Could we stay neutral on this one? I don't know. To me, it seems school safety. I don't know. It just feels icky to say like we don't or we do support this.
Yeah. So let me clarify with what it is, and then maybe yes is where you want to go with that. So the Claire Davis Act currently allows the school district to actually be held responsible in the event of a school shooting. So we have governmental immunity for other types of accidents and injuries and damages that occur. That's not to say we can't be sued civilly. We can always be and have been sued civilly, but we have governmental immunity in terms of acts of injury in a school district, which means that we can only be sued up to a given amount. Okay, so there's a ceiling on how much we can be sued for because of our governmental immunity. This act allowed school districts to be held liable for a school shooting if they had reason to have known that that person might become violent, and thereby suing individuals and as district employees and school districts beyond what is allowed for any other type of injury or act in a school district. So
I just don't, I mean, how would you prove that a school district would know that someone would become violent?
Well, and that's where the undue burden comes in, Ms. Solis. So currently what we do is, all of us, we spend significant amounts of time monitoring social media, monitoring safe to tell reports, many districts that have actually purchased software programs that cull through social media, cull through emails to watch for potential threats of violence because of the worry that the school district could be held liable. Chief Gates, is there anything you'd like to add about this?
Your sentiment has been right on so far, Dr. Judge.
So can I ask, do you think this act was come about because I can understand the undue burden of school systems trying to predict acts of violence when they have no reports coming in. I'm wondering if this was in response to the Florida school shooting specifically, where there were multiple reports about the shooter directly to the school, not on social media, but to the school. This is state law,
so it is not related to what happened in Florida. This is specifically related to the shooting at Arapahoe High School.
Okay.
Where a student by the name of Claire Davis was shot and died in that school shooting. There was indication in that case that the student who committed this crime did have some mental health issues and some concern. You know, there had been concerns in the record of this student, and so there was a desire to hold the school district liable at a higher level. So advocates for that proposed the Claire Davis Act, which said school districts need to be held accountable, and so they do not have governmental immunity, meaning they can be sued for far more damages than which is typically $1 million, than those damages if they should have known that the person who committed that act of violence possibly would do that.
How would a school be held more accountable than the parents?
Well, the parents don't have the kind of money school districts do, Ms. Solis. So I think there you have it. Yeah.
I'm feeling inclined.
That's why we have governmental immunity.
I'm feeling inclined to join Mr. Talley in this desire to maybe remain neutral. My fear is that I'm trying to figure out what should have is defined as. Mm-hmm. You know, what is considered should have, the threshold for should have known a student was going to be violent. Mm-hmm. And unless that's truly clarified pretty specifically in the act, of which I do not know this act, so I would defer to our counsel about what it says, I think we might not want to take a stance on it. Because I don't want to revoke something that is keeping the honest accountability that school districts should have through things like Safe to Tell and viable threats that are made to counselors and teachers and such like that. But I also am concerned that, you know, we can't always know everybody's mind that attends a school. So how do we know what's the should have?
Yeah. No, I can't disagree with you, and I will say the intent behind the Claire Davis Act was well-meaning. Right. It is about saying, hey, everybody needs to do their due diligence to make sure that we don't have a school shooting. I think where school districts, and the district in particular who put this forward, I think school districts, and we believe too, we don't know a lot. I mean, there are a lot of things we don't know, and Claire Davis Act allows us to be held accountable at a higher level for this type of act than any other act that could be committed in a school setting. And I think causes a great deal of angst for school districts and a lot of worry around are we, you know, what we're doing. So it's a tough one.
Was there any guidelines attached to this as far as
no
what proper protocol?
No, you know, the Safe to Tell stuff is very linked to this and the importance of following Safe to Tell. But we do no. This act just allows us. It takes away our governmental immunity, is what it does. So it allows a family to sue a school district for a much greater monetary amount than what any other kind of case in a school would allow.
But there also has to be evidence that the school knew, right? I can't just come in as a parent and sue you.
I think what's tricky is it has not been tested much.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of worry behind what does that mean that we knew. And I'll tell you the other piece behind this, knowing this district it's coming from, is this very district does not want all that information put into student records. But part of what we have to do is put this information in student records. So as a student goes from 5th grade to 6th grade, that is in their record. So that when the 6th grade administrator or counselor begins to see something, they can see what happened back in 4th grade and know, yikes, there may be a pattern here. And so part of what's behind this is we've got to put that in a student's record and keep it in a student's record so that we know. And so that's part of what I'm certain this district is probably worried about.
So we have a system, we have with our MTSS system that ability for that information to be transferred from year to year, which
Correct.
when those conversations happened, that it wasn't just that district, it was a lot of districts and a lot of educators that were, no, we're not going to put that information, we're going to start fresh every year.
Yeah.
So I think we've come a long way
Yeah.
in documenting that and making sure that that information is transparent and available. Am I right in that?
Oh, yes, yes. And yes.
I would like to stay neutral on this one personally. I am a supporter of the Claire Davis Act, so it's hard for me. And I think of as a parent, I would hope that that information stays with the student just in case, so the safety of my child. And I wish that this was more of a resolution around funding, more funding to support the Claire Davis Act instead of trying to repeal the Claire Davis Act. I think it was put in for a reason, and I don't know.
One, as a district, I mean, let's say you see something and now you're going to do what with it? You've seen something in the record and now that pushes you to do what? To get who involved and how do you start that process? And then how do you, I mean, what if you have a parent say, why are you singling out my child when there's, other kids that have, done similar stuff, but now you're concerned that my child is going to do, I mean, without any clear guidelines and without funding, I just see this as a really, I mean, this is a struggle. I mean, especially since we know that there are a lot of children of color that are in the punitive system a lot more than other children. So this whole thing is concerning. I agree on staying neutral. And I mean, I don't know at what point people start having a conversation about this, but without any guidelines, and this could look a lot of different ways in a lot of different school districts with a lot of different people. So this is
a good one, another one for us to do some more research on and come back to you on at the end of the month. Let's do that.
Next one that comes with a favorable recommendation, I think, is number 20. I think that's on page 32.
So are we skipping 18 and 19?
Well, they don't come with recommendations.
Okay.
So I was going to, and we're running short on time if we want to eat. But this resolution, Cosby supports giving teachers and school staff a high priority for receiving the COVID-19 vaccine when available to help ensure schools can operate effectively with in-person education. Is there any reason to oppose this?
No, I don't think so. I think, the governor has said educators should be right there with healthcare providers in their ability to receive the vaccine. So, no, I think it's appropriate.
Any reason to oppose this from anyone? Okay. Moving right along. Next one, number 21, is forwarded with favorable recommendation from the Legislative Committee as well. Cosby supports school boards placing a high priority on reducing carbon consumption and making decisions regarding capital improvements, energy use, transportation, and supporting climate change and environmental education. Cosby also urges Colorado General Assembly and federal government to take swift and effective action on climate change to protect current and future students. Not exactly sure what this does.
I want us to do some more research on this one, because the last thing I want is this to be some new mandates from the legislature of things that we might have to do, say, with our buildings to limit energy use or to limit our carbon footprint. So I think we need to do some more research on this, because I think this could come with a price that we may not have the ability to fulfill. So I want to know more about what it is. So for example, you know, we're going to do everything we can at the new Greeley West High School to minimize energy use, to limit our carbon footprint, and we are not going to try for the LEED certification like we did at Prairie Heights Middle School, because the expense that comes with that is significant. So we absolutely will, you know, that building will be energy efficient. That building will have all the gadgets that we can add at a reasonable cost to limit energy use and our carbon footprint. But we are not going, you know, we made a decision that square footage was more important than that LEED certification. So I would want to know more about what comes with this. If it's the kind of requirements like that LEED certification requires, you all know, those of you who are a part of that, those are significant changes and could add millions and millions of dollars when you're building buildings or renovating buildings, depending on what the requirements are.
Okay. Well, that is the last one that comes with recommendations, and we are, it's 5:23. So is everyone okay with us not discussing the last couple so that we can move on to eating before our board?
I just had a quick question on number 19.
Yes.
I know we're not through COVID, so we don't even really know what the final impact would be, but we know that we've been offering through, you know, our insurance and stuff some additional support. Is there any conversation around supporting this one?
No, I had not seen this one before, and I find it curious that the Cosby board did not, or legislative committee didn't support it. So my guess is, I wonder if they just left that off on this one, because it says Cosby supports adoption. So I think we should do some more work on that one. I mean, there's some safeguard language in there, recognizing need, providing funding. So if they recognize need and provide funding, then I think that's appropriate.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think this may be a typo from Cosby. I wonder if they did support this.
Yeah, if you can check on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's interesting they supported this one, or did not support this one, but did support
the carbon one.
The carbon one.
Yeah, I think it's a typo.
I think maybe it's a typo.
I think it's a typo.
Okay. Is there any other discussion we need to have on this?
I think at some point, President Matthews, when we come back, we should discuss 18 around the safe to tell. We just need to do some more research on this. This is coming forward from the St. Vrain Valley School District, but Cosby did not support it. So I think we should do some more research on it, and then we can see where we are. I think we should decide if we support or we oppose, probably, because it's to see if it gets legs. Okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. We've got homework for Ms. Smash, for Mr. Fall, for Dr. Pilch, and we'll bring some back to you at the
even Gates,
the other October board meeting this month. Okay?
I think so. He looks awake.
All right, we're about 25 minutes over time, which we built in a lot of time, looks like. So is there anything that we need to discuss on community engagement? I will just say again how thankful we are for the Dream Team and the way that they support this district. It was a great breakfast. And
it's a great event.
So we need this. I need all the support, and we have wonderful support from this community. All right, we're to debriefing the work session. And we'll start with Mr. Talla.
Hate when we start with me. It was a good work session. I really enjoyed going over policies, so it's our resolutions, policy. I'm kind of a nerd, like that. So overall, I like that. I look forward to hearing back from what you and your team find out about what we talked about and the conversations to come.
Ms. Pappas?
I too appreciated the work session and the discussion about the resolutions. There was a point, and I am not pleased suggesting that this happens now, but we have had conversations about our school board becoming more involved in putting forth some resolutions of our own. And we at one point talked about having possibly some subcommittees and maybe a subcommittee that might work on that, or perhaps it might be a work session as we see issues arise. Since I've been on the board, we haven't brought forth any resolutions. So I would just like us to keep that in the back of our mind as something to seriously and intentionally think about.
And Ms. Pappas, I think with having hired in-house legal counsel, we actually have more capacity to do that now.
Okay.
And that would be a part of Mr. Fall's role to help the Board of Education to think about that and to sort through some of that, and where we may even as staff bring pieces to you all, and then you all, consider those pieces. So
thank you.
I appreciate you saying that.
Ms. Solis?
Always great discussions. I appreciate everyone's views on this and the impacts on some of this legislative piece and kind of where we sit on it. So I just appreciate everyone chiming in and helping us work together as a board to really support or not support certain issues here.
Mr. Hafley?
Thanks everybody for their efforts. Welcome to District 6, Mr. Fall. We're delighted you're here to go to work. Thank you.
Ms. Mueller?
I have nothing new to add. Good meeting.
Me as well. Nothing to add. Thanks everyone, and we've got about 30 minutes. So let's take our break, and we'll see you back at 6 o'clock.